Joining me now is Martin Abrams, Labour councillor for Lambeth. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David.
127 days of lies, more lies, and they continue.
Well, David, let's be clear. So after 127 days, Labour have clearly got their work cut out after 14 years of Tory rule and austerity that has absolutely devastated the country. We've just heard today that more than 1 in 3 children and a quarter of adults are now living in poverty as deprivation levels rise to the highest levels that have been seen in the 21st century. So to turn that around in 127 days is a near impossible task.
So can I just ask you, if you increase employers' national insurance, which means that those companies are going to cut back and people lose their jobs, how is that going to change poverty for people in this country?
Well, that is a very relevant question. Personally, I believe that Labour should be redistributing wealth. We've seen huge inequality. The richest 350 people in this country have the same wealth as the GDP of Poland, and as I've just highlighted, you know, children are being cast into poverty. I don't think tinkering with national insurance charges is in any way going to make our country a more equal and a better place.
So they shouldn't have done it?
Well, personally, they should be looking at things like wealth taxes.
So you think they shouldn't have done that? Let me just be clear. Do you think they should not have increased employers' national insurance contributions?
Well, listen, that needs to be looked at. Well, no, I don't think they should have. They should have implemented
that's very honest of you.
They should have implemented a suite of wealth taxes rather than target national insurance.
And what about the winter fuel allowance? Should they have done that?
I mean, categorically no. The winter fuel allowance policy was an absolutely horrendous error by Keir Starmer in his first 50 days as Prime Minister, just before summer recess, which allowed that entire debate to be played out over the summer silly season. And when the danger is now is that we're seeing studies that are saying that this change is going to put 50,000 pensioners into poverty and potentially cause many pensioners to suffer and potentially freeze to death. So that is an absolutely horrendous choice by the Labour Party. I mean, that's probably why. Sure. That's probably why Keir Starmer's personality and popularity ratings are absolutely tanking. A Labour government should not be scapegoating some of the most vulnerable people in society, and that goes for younger people as well, and because they've just announced an increase to things like tuition fees. So Labour are making some serious mistakes, and I think that probably goes to show that.
Well, I was going to say thank you. Well, thank you for your candour and your honesty there, because at least you answered the question, unlike many Labour politicians, because they keep saying there is this 22 billion fiscal hole, then Rachel Reeves has invented a 40 billion increase in terms of taxes, and it's hitting every single person. So we're now seeing inflation rise from 1.7% to 2.3%. As a result, of course, we're worried about interest rates, people coming to the end of their mortgage. They can't afford to remortgage, or they may be worried about how they afford to keep the roof over their heads. This is a very strange set of policies for Labour.
I couldn't agree more. It's not hitting every single person, though, David, because the richest in society.
But what about the majority? But the majority, you're talking about the richest. Sure, I take that point. What about the majority of people in this country who are not terribly well off? Those people who strive, who have 2, 3 jobs, the middle classes.
Yeah, and that's why I've highlighted that those people that might have been in the middle previously are now ending up suffering in poverty after 14 years of Tory austerity.
But you can't keep blaming the Tories. Labour is in power, and they chose to make these decisions. Is Rachel Reeves the right person to be Chancellor?
No. No, Rachel Reeves is not the right person to be Chancellor, because Rachel Reeves makes out that a tough decision is cutting winter fuel allowance.
Yeah.
A tough decision is keeping the 2-child benefit cap. I'll tell you what a tough decision is, David, is implementing wealth taxes on the wealthiest in society to redistribute wealth. That is a tough decision. Cutting winter fuel allowance is an easy decision for politicians to make because they're not going to suffer from in terms of their big wealthy donors and their big funders and the big businesses that are putting pressure on them as a result. The Labour Party, we've got to remember we have not had many Labour governments in this country. The Conservative Party have been elected the vast majority of elections over the last 100 years. So this is kind of a once-in-a-generation opportunity for a Labour government to come in, to support working class people, to implement real Labour policies about taking our utilities and public services back into public ownership, so vast amounts of wealth aren't extracted by privateers and taken offshore, to properly fund our NHS, which is one of the best Labour Party creations ever. I
don't doubt it.
To make sure that waiting lists are cut.
But throwing money, and look, I speak with authority on the NHS, throwing more money at a broken NHS without reforming it is wasted cash.
I don't agree. Yeah, I don't agree. What we need is to take our NHS... You don't agree?
What, you just want to throw money at the NHS and hope it gets better?
No, what we need to do is go back to basics with the NHS and ensure that we take it back into full public ownership rather than having this disparate, disparate organisation that's made up.
But hang on a minute. When you look at, but hang on a minute. If you look at the productivity of a truly NHS hospital and one of a private hospital, they are poles apart. Private hospitals are far more efficient.
Well, listen, getting into a debate about public and private hospitals, you've got to remember, David, that the majority of people that work in private hospitals work in the NHS as well.
They do.
So they're only efficient because they're relying on the workers that are basically working in the NHS. The vast majority of private doctors are NHS doctors.
They are, but they are contracted for a certain number of days a week and they choose to work in the private sector. What's wrong with that?
Well, that's because you end up with a two-tier health system where the richest can get seen immediately and the poorest end up on waiting lists.
OK, so the NHS is... I do just want to move on and talk about another thing. The Labour came to power promising to sort out the migrants, the immigration situation in this country. Of course, they closed the Bibby Stockholm. They said they would get rid of all the hotels. They've actually opened more hotels since they've been in power. They have not got on top of the migration problem.
Well, I know migration is one of your favourite topics on...
Well, I think it's actually something...
TV.
But I think it's something on everyone's mind across the country.
Well, actually, it doesn't appear in often the top 5 priorities for members of the public, but the media, like yourselves,
4 million quid. 4 million quid a day we're spending. 4 million quid.
David, let me just finish this, because I think... Scapegoating migrants, which the Labour Party under Keir Starmer continues to do, comes straight from the Conservative Party playbook, and that should never be an option.
Hang on a minute. What do you mean
Party.
Scapegoating? What we want is for those people who do deserve asylum to be allowed to stay in this country, but actually we cannot have people coming here on boats who are economic migrants.
No, what I mean by scapegoating migrants, David, is that all of the country's problems, like increased NHS waiting lists, like people not being able to get housing, all these problems that have basically been exacerbated by austerity, by neoliberal policies, not migrants. That's what I mean about scapegoating migrants. And Keir Starmer has chosen to cozy up to people like Nicola Maloney from Italy. And, Keir Starmer should know better as a human rights lawyer than aligning himself with a far-right Italian prime minister. And he should be promoting a much fairer immigration system, not taking tips on immigration from fascists.
So that's interesting. So Rachel Reeves shouldn't be Chancellor. Should Keir Starmer be Prime Minister?
Well, listen, I am not on Keir Starmer's Christmas card list. I am not Keir Starmer's biggest fan. We're a broad church in the Labour Party.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think that Keir Starmer is doing a very good job, and that can be seen by the public opinion polls.
Can I just ask you one final? Sorry, time is so tight. Can I just ask you?
Turn this around?
Yeah.
Keir Starmer needs to really champion policies that will make a material difference to people's lives, put more money in people's pockets, radically improve public services, radically improve things like housing so that people can live in dignity, and make sure that our society is one where wealth is distributed so that we all have an equal shot. Society.
We talk about housing. There's another story in the Daily Mail today saying Angela Rayner's building blitz plan to build 1.5 million homes will be more difficult than we expected. Also, just very quickly, if I may, did the government choose the wrong fight by attacking farmers?
Well, listen, it is an interesting fight to take, but I think there's been a lot of noise around this, and a lot of people who've been complaining loudest about changes to the inheritance tax rules are extremely large landowners. People like Jeremy Clarkson, who owns a 1,000-acre farm, who previously admitted that he bought that farm to avoid inheritance tax.
But that actually is not a big farm.
People like the Duchess of Rutland, who owns thousands and thousands.
What about,
of
hang on a minute, 30% of farms made a loss in 2023-24, 25% made profits under 25,000. Many of my friends are farmers. It's really tough. You don't make a lot of money. You are asset rich and you're cash poor.
Well, 100%, and I think the Labour Party possibly does need to look again about impacting farms with a certain number of acres. I think there's a lot of farms that the average farm size is about 200 acres, and that's why I pointed out that the biggest landowners are the ones that are shouting loudest about it, because they obviously are quite worried that they're going to get hit with a big inheritance tax bill. So I think Labour probably do need to look at protecting farmers with smaller land ownership in terms of assets, and making sure that the richest, those with the broadest shoulders, do pay their fair share. But I'll go back again to what I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, David. There needs to be a suite of wealth taxes. We live in a very unequal society, and those with the broadest shoulders should be paying the most.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your honesty as well. That's Martin Abrams, Labour councillor for Lambeth.